Hello. So I'm going to give a Illustrator demonstration. So this is Adobe Illustrator. And although there are various ways that we could modify figures and create posters, I have grown to prefer Adobe Illustrator because of the amount of versatility it has. Normally, I would suggest some sort of free alternative because I'm more of the leaning of using freer software. But Adobe Illustrator seems to not really have things that compete with it or are as effective in my personal experience. There may be things out there, and so you can feel free to comment on that to me. But for now, let me give a demonstration for Adobe Illustrator for those who want to use it, especially as we're concerned with it in the neurosciences. I'll show you a few tricks of what I've used to make figures and posters and the like, but my application will be focused a lot more on trying to make figures involving brain atlas pages and sections and things like that. So let's dive in. This is the newest version currently of Adobe Illustrator 2021. And I'm just going to go ahead and open up a file or two. So let's take a look. Now, before I jump into how to mess around with a current figure, I should note that there are multiple file types that Adobe Illustrator can open. There is the AI file, appropriately named for the software's name, but you can also open up PDFs. And in particular, when you save PDFs, it can actually save all the layers and separate objects. I'll explain what objects are shortly. So if you want other people to view something you made in Illustrator, I would suggest saving it as a PDF, and then you could open it again and modify it as if it was just a regular Illustrator file for the most part. This at least allows people that don't have Illustrator, though, to view your work, whereas an AI file, they may not be able to view without the right tools. One thing I also want to note is that if you have access to a mouse or rat brain atlas, you can actually use some of the Illustrator templates they have for each and every atlas page. And I do mean that. So we have the rat brain atlas being hundreds of pages long, including the coronal, sagittal, and horizontal sections. And in the Paxinos and Watson version, you can either have the blue colored labeled ones or the black unlabeled ones. Some people prefer the black unlabeled because they don't have to worry about deleting the labels and it's already black and white rather than colorized. We're going to play around with the blue labeled ones today. And we see that each of these corresponds to each similarly numbered atlas page. So figure 1 in the atlas is 001 here. These are all EPS files, which are openable with Adobe Illustrator, among probably some other programs. Let's say I want to take a look at the Nucleus of Comets. So for those who work with this, take a pause in the video and think about which rat brain atlas pages will have the Nucleus of Comets in it most prominently. So if you're coming back from a brief pause, I might have kind of given this away a little bit by hovering around the number range that we expect to see it. So generally from pages 12-ish through about close to 30 is where we'll see the Nucleus of Comets in its subdivisions. I like to look at the anterior comets, so I'm going to pick page 14 here. It's going to give us some alerts about legacy text and things like that. If we want to update it so we can modify it, like regular text editor rather than like an image file that we stretch and skew, we can choose to update it. So I'm going to do that now. And the updated text, although it's pink colored here, these pink colored backgrounds, these do not actually appear in the final version. So if you were to print this out as an image file, these are not pink background anymore. It's just a white or transparent background, a blank background, if you will. All right, so this looks otherwise, aside from the pink weirdness, similar to what you'd expect. Oh, sorry, first time opening Illustrator on this computer, so it's giving me some alerts. It pretty much has everything you expect to see on page 14 of the Rat Brain Atlas. What's interesting is that you can separate things out into layers, much like you can with Photoshop or a free equivalent, such as that program called GIMP that I've made a separate video on. And these have been made by the Atlas creators. So you can have layers that involve the labels, as well as dashed and solid lines. Even this cross section is its own layer, and the grid in the background too is its own layer. And within these layers, you actually have these things called objects or paths, and these can be all separated. I'll explain that in a little bit, but just to orient people who aren't familiar with Photoshop, layers are just things you can superimpose on each other. So if you have experience with Microsoft PowerPoint or a similar program, we know that we can kind of have things overlap or rearrange them so one thing's on top of the other. And layers work in a similar fashion. Some layers are see-through, so they have like a blank background or a transparency aspect to them. Other layers are not, kind of depends. But one thing you can do with the layers is if you don't want to see them, you can just toggle the visibility by clicking on these little eye icons here. So let's say I want to get rid of the labels because they're really distracting. Boom, gone. So all those pink little labels are gone. We get a nice view of the actual brain section diagram. Let's say I don't want the cross section anymore. Boom, gone. Grid, go away. So now we're just left with just the raw diagram of that section going through the brain. If we don't want to accidentally bump into these and modify them, if they're visible, you can accidentally modify them. We could always just lock them. That way, if I try to grab onto, let's say, one of the dashed lines using a select tool, then it won't really let me do that. So if I try to click on any dashed lines, it'll say, nope, you can't do that. You can't click on those. But if I hover over any of the solid lines, it will allow me to select those. So let's unlock that. Now I can pick on these. You'll also see that there are these weird little colored vertical lines. Those represent the color that things will take when you hover over them. So you'll notice this is red. That corresponds to the dash lines layers red color here. And you can edit these colors and names by just double clicking and changing it to a different color, especially if it's a hard to see color on your picture, as well as rename the layer accordingly. I should make a note though. When you are using these Rat Brain Atlas EPS files for each page, whatever you do, do not overwrite the original, because then you have to go and dig up the original in case you modified anything. So be sure not to modify this copy. You may want to save this as an alternate copy. So that is what I suggest here. We can save it probably as a PDF just for ease sake. So save as, don't show again, please. Okay, save on computer. And so I'm just going to stick this in the Atlas here, and we're going to save it as a PDF because, like I said, that makes it a little bit more accessible. You can have options, like if there are multiple artboards, which I'll describe what those are later. You can choose which ones you want displayed. For now, we're going to keep it simple. Save it as that. It might give us options to save it. We're not going to change anything, so we're just going to go ahead and save it as PDF. So this way, now we're not going to modify the original EPS file. So somebody else can pull that up later if you have like a shared computer you're using this on, as a lot of people in labs do. Okay, why am I showing all this stuff? Well, it makes a good starting template to show what we can mess around with. So let's say I just lock the dashed lines and only can now modify solid lines. We can select things, but there are two different types of selection tools. We got the regular and the direct. So the regular is a black arrow, the direct is a white arrow. The difference is that regular will kind of select everything that's grouped together, potentially the whole layer, so all of the solid line stuff here, whereas direct can select paths and objects. This is where we start to see a difference between Photoshop and Illustrator, because Illustrator is a vector graphics program and not a sort of pixel graphics program. I know people that are more familiar with image editing might take umbrage with the way I'm terming these, but this is, again, for the layperson. So what I mean by this being a vector graphics program is probably best illustrated by what happens when we zoom in. When you zoom in regular image editing, things like good old Paint or Photoshop or GIMP, what happens a lot of times is things get grainy because you zoom in and then you eventually see the pixels, right? Watch what happens when I zoom in here. I'm doing this by hitting Control+, by the way. Where are the pixels? Can't really see any sort of pixels becoming more and more grainy. It's like the image keeps on maintaining its resolution as we get deeper in, almost like a real life drawing. And so this starts to show us that, okay, the way things are constructed on screen aren't just individual dots and pixels that stitch together to form things that look like lines. No, these are continuous shapes that don't have any specific resolution until we print it out somehow or save it as an image file that isn't in Adobe Illustrator. So these don't really have any sort of like pixel properties yet. There are just lines, and these lines can be different thicknesses relative to each other, but again, they're not pixel widths per se in this program. So that starts to show some of the weird stuff that happens. And this is important also because you don't crop things as you do in other programs, and you don't just use an eraser to cut lines as you do in other programs. Everything is either continuous paths or shapes, unless of course you import a picture from a different program or file. Let me show you what happens when we can play around with these paths. So notice as I'm hovering around the solid outline of this rat brain section, at some points, it'll suddenly pop up an anchor here. So this is the regular path. If I click on the path, then it'll show all the anchor points out as little hollow boxes. When you click on any one of these, it'll actually select the anchor. So this one's now a solid box because I've selected just that anchor. If I select using Shift to click on another thing, then this selects both this and that anchor. And if I hit Shift again and click on this, it'll deselect it, but keep this one selected. That's how you multiple select certain things in this program in general. So this direct selection tool differs from the regular selection tool in that you can isolate specific points on a line where it curves, as well as specific aspects of those points. It says anchor, and you can actually have the anchor tilt different ways. You have these weird little handle things. Watch what happens when I mess around with the handle on one side. So we have this one selected here. If I didn't select it, I don't think we can really modify it. So we'll tug on this handle. And as I twist it like this, the whole line distorts and twists in that direction. So you'll notice it's kind of trying to put these purple lines underneath. It's trying to line up with other things on the diagram. We're just going to ignore that for now. But it can basically just distort the line and wiggle it around in any way that you choose just by playing with these anchors. You might be wondering, well, why do we have anchors on both sides if twisting them around basically does the same thing? It doesn't quite do the same thing, because watch what happens when, let's say I have it vertical like this. Watch what happens to the right side of this line compared to the left side. On the right side, it becomes longer and curved up higher, but on the left side, there is no change, because the left side is determined by this other anchor over here. So if I elongate this, that drags that down. So in these ways, we can actually separate different sides of an anchor point out. Okay, this kind of made it look a little bit ugly and distorted, so let's undo it. Control Z is the quick undo shortcut to do that on the keyboard. Let's say I want to distort the shape, not by trying to twist the line around, but by just moving this anchor point out. Well, there are a few ways I could do that. I could do this manually by mouse with, again, the direct selection tool. And if I click and drag it, it just drags it over and then continues the line out from there in as clean of a curved fashion as it can. It doesn't really do right angles in this case. It just tries to continue it as a smooth curve rather than hard corners. You can also do this as long as this anchor point is selected with this direct selection tool. You can also do this by using the arrow keys on your keyboard. So when I hit left, you can see it slightly moving left, slightly moving up now, and you can hold it down to move it in those directions. And I believe if you hit shift click, it'll move farther and faster, whereas like individual taps from the arrow key won't move it that fast. If you hold shift and do the arrow key, it'll move much further and much faster. Let's go ahead and put this back. You can continually do the undo function. It does have a very large save buffer for all the actions you've done. So that way, if you mess things up and you have to go really far back, you can do that. Additionally, I think, I'm not sure in the program if it actually gives you like a drop-down menu of how many actions you can undo. Some other programs do that. You might have to dig around for it. I imagine they may have it. Okay, so that's neat. We can distort lines in different ways, but let's say we want to do something more than that. Let's say we want to erase part of a line or cut it, or maybe instead of having the anchor point over here, we want a different one so that we anchor it here, but then we want to pull this piece right here up. We have to add a new anchor point, and we can do that with an anchor point tool. One of the key things about the menu here on the left is that anytime you see a very tiny white right angle triangle in the bottom corner of each of these selectable tools, it means that there are actually more tools hidden. For instance, when I click and hold here, I have the option of selecting either pen tool to draw new paths or an anchor point tool to create new anchor points on a path that already exists. Additionally, you can draw different things than a rectangle. You can do ellipses, polygons, lines, all sorts of stuff like that. We have a text tool, but then we could actually do different things with text, like trying to get it to curl around paths, which in other programs would be super annoying to do. But if you have a curved path, you can get the text to follow the outline of that path. So let's see if this will work. I haven't really done this here, but I'm going to try it out. Oh, okay. So when you create text, instead of giving you a blank box that you could easily lose by misclicking somewhere else, it'll actually fill in the text by default. So you have something to select and edit. This text is the default programmer's insert. It's Latin. I don't know what it stands for. I feel like I know what it should, but this is basically what they chose to do as their default fill-in text that you then replace. And, oh, that's neat. So if I just hold down delete, it can basically wrap it all the way around and back. If I want to just get rid of it fast, I'll do shift and then control and then just advance it with the arrow key. Wraps all the way around, get rid of it, and just say, I think this was motor cortex 1. We'll see if I'm right about that when I unclick this. So I'll do the regular select tool, unclick that. Let's see what happens. Oh, it seems to have gotten rid of the path. We're going to want to bring that back in a hot sec. Because I think it converted the text, the path into a text rather than putting it onto the path. It's a little bit awkward there. We'll try that out in a second though. Okay, so let's take a look at labels. Pretty close, not quite. We're still in somatosensory area, S1, M1's over here. So obviously that's erroneous. We want to get rid of that. Let's go ahead, just hit Control Z. Oh, it also does undos for disappearing and reappearing layers. Okay, so we have this path here, and it's still in path form and not text. Let's say we want to make it a different color. Well, we should select that specific path, right? And we're selecting a path rather than an anchor point. You'll notice down here on the left, there is a white and a blue thing here. The white being the fill, because it is a filled box, and the blue being the stroke of the line. So this suggests to us that the shape that it's making, it has a blue outline and a white fill. If we wanted to make it see-through, so let me turn on the grid to show this, we see that the brain section is not see-through because the grid that exists behind it is not visible. So this overlays on top of the grid based on this being a white fill-in. But if we turn this into none, then the grid is visible behind it. So this little slash, this red slash that goes through a box or through other things that you'll see, means that we get rid of any sort of coloring and it just becomes completely transparent. You can influence the transparency though. So let me just close this. We don't need this popped up. There are properties. So we have transparency somewhere in here. Since this is on a different computer, the tools are in slightly different places. So I need to kind of get reaccustomed. But if we change opacity, that is basically our transparency. So if we turn it down to 50, it becomes about half transparent. In other words, the grid lines aren't as clearly visible as they would be normally. They're kind of hazy visible. And we can see that when we put it at 75%, that it's mostly colorized white, but you could faintly see the grid lines bleeding through a little bit. So this is how you can change how like see-through something is, especially if you want it to be a little bit see-through, but retain its normal color that you started with. You know what? I don't like this white color. Let's change it to something else. What'll it give us? When I double click on the white box, it gives us a full range of colors. So I'm going to go for something simple like fuchsia. Yes, that is simple to me. It's absurd, I know. And now, for some reason, we've gotten gray. I think that might have to do with it picking something that I did not ask for. Let's try getting it to shift to a web color. Interesting. Why are you doing that? Huh. I think it's because this is supposed to be in grayscale and it's not doing the color thing that we want it to. So let's toy around with something regarding the path. Yeah, so it seems that it's only giving us grayscale options. We probably want to convert this to a different type of color scheme. Let's see here. Should be path properties to do this. So fill, stroke, okay. Libraries, color themes panel. No, don't need that. I know at this point, I'm kind of just playing around with it to explore a few things that I normally don't use. But there is a setting to change the stroke color scheme to being not black and white, but instead a color range rather than, you know, what we have here. So let's see if I can get that somehow. The color group? No. Interesting. Well, we at least know that the stroke color is something we can toy around with a little bit better since that is full color. So let's go ahead and do that. Or potentially not. Let's try it here. Can we do fuchsia? Will it do fuchsia? Odd. Here we go. Seems very set on doing grayscale. So here's the box that we actually need to pull up in order to edit things. We see that it only does grayscale here despite selecting a color. So we need to convert the color scheme from grayscale using this little menu over here that I was trying to get to. And we can either do RGB or CMYK. So red, green, blue, or cyan, magenta, yellow, and kappa being the grayscale effect. So now we should actually be able to do the colors in this specific case. And if I deselect, there we go. It's actually purple. Let me go ahead and click on the fill then, change this to CMYK, and then say, I'm going to do this obnoxious yellow. Yeah, it looks terrible. Okay. I know you weren't exactly hoping for like bee-colored brains here, but this is what you're getting today. So bear with me. All right, so this is how we can change colors of things. And you might be wondering what exactly is the purpose of doing all this stuff with lines and such. One of the things I kind of glossed over that I want to revisit is the fact that since this is a vector graphics program, instead of having to modify things by pixels, everything is its own independent shape that can be modified again and again later. So rather than having something be erased and then having to redraw it manually, everything is separable objects or paths. So let's take a look at that. If we just kind of hide, or I should undo the obnoxious colors because they're very distracting. Okay, so that should do. If we want to just put that aside there, if we want to change things here, we can actually ungroup a lot of things in this menu. So let's take a look at the solid dropdown. Each and every one of these is a path. Move you over here. And so we can select specific paths that are part of this layer. So in Photoshop, usually when we have layers, they're all different images that are made of pixels. In this case, though, this layer is made of lines that have no pixel width quality yet. So we can select certain parts, like for instance, I select this one, we get certain paths like that. We get this internal path that goes around the corpus callosum type area. Another path that goes underneath the anterior commissure, being this other fiber tract here. And we could isolate each and every one of these. And you can continually modify them as you like. So I can take this small selection tool and then just move this whole thing around here. But since this whole thing is selected, I actually want to maybe distort it. So let's click on it again. We'll zoom in using Control+, and whatever you have selected, when you hit Control+ or Control-, it'll zoom in or out from that specific selection, respectively. So I want to distort this only. So I'm going to just do this, and it looks very silly right now, but we're going for silly in this case. Now I want to move it. So what I can do to move it is I do the regular selection tool, and this allows me to, hold on a second, I think I need to click on path, perhaps. This is probably the kludgiest part of trying to do this. There we go. So what I did here was, let's say I had clicked only on one anchor point, and then I'm like, okay, I distorted this thing, now I want to move it. But if I click it with the regular selection tool, like if I do something like this, it might select this, or it might select everything else in the layer if it's all grouped together. So that can be a problem. If we have something specific that we've zeroed out using the direct selection tool, and we want to do something more with that, then what we can do is we can click on the regular selection tool, and then I believe it should allow us to select the entire object here. We might again need to select the path itself in order for that to work. Let's try that. No? Okay. So we'll use the direct selection tool. When you direct select a whole object, it tries to move the object rather than stretching any of the anchor points or paths. So right now what I'm doing is I'm just holding down the arrow keys to move it around. When you hold down Shift in the arrow keys, it'll move it faster and farther for each button press. And we can also play around with the scaling of this stuff as well. So we have a scaling tool somewhere in this menu over here. Let's see if we can find it. We've got the rotate tool. Here we go, scale tool. We'll try that out first. So much like in Photoshop and similar programs, you can scale it by clicking on it manually and then just stretching it in and out, wiggling it around, deforming it as you'd like. Let's say you want to be a lot more precise about that, though. You're like, I want this to be exactly double the size that it is and not more or less. So we can actually double click on the scaling tool on the left, and it gives us the option of modifying it. You can have it scale up in different amounts, horizontal and vertical. But if you wanted to do it uniform, then we would just do the uniform and say, okay, I want this to be 200% of its current size. Having this preview check mark clicked off allows us to see it happen right in action before it actually commits to doing it. We can also scale the corners and scale strokes and effects in case those need to be scaled up. For instance, if this is double the size and we want the actual lines that make the outline to be double the thickness, that's where we click in scales, strokes, and effects. And now we see that the line is thicker. Similarly, if there are hard corners, then it will try to do that with corners, but this object is a little bit curved, so we don't really have that going on. But if you don't want to scale up the thickness of the lines, and you just want to scale up the shape, then we'll just have this unchecked. And then after hitting OK, it commits to having the shape be enlarged. You can also rotate it using the scale tool. It gets a little bit messier doing that. So you could just select instead the rotate tool from over here. And the rotate tool, as per its name, when you click and select the path, it just allows you to rotate it without stretching and skewing it. So this is where you can have your own manual adjustment of rotating it. But let's say you want to rotate it a specific angle. Then we double click on this rotate tool, and it allows us to punch in an angle. Keep in mind that 45 degrees are the diagonals, 90-degree amounts are the vertical and horizontal. So if we go in and do something like 45 degrees, it'll tilt it 45 degrees more than what it was before. You'll notice it hasn't changed anything yet. I just need to click on something else in this window or hit the tab for it to select something else. So let me do that. And now it's tilted at 45 degrees. Let's see what happens when I do 90 and then hit tab. Okay. It's kind of rotating it counterclockwise rather than clockwise like I expected. That's fine. 180. And now it's in reverse of what it was before. And of course, once you go past 360, it just keeps wrapping it around. So we'll just kind of keep it where it was. Keep it as this weird looking carrot thing. Maybe we should fill it into a carrot type color, but I've already shown the color stuff. So we'll keep a hold on the wacky stuff till we get into more later things that we can do with this program. Also notice I'm holding down Control and it actually highlights the extent of the object that we have selected there. So when I release it, that sort of outline disappears. All right. So I mentioned before, what if we want to cut up a path? Maybe provide a new anchor to it. Kind of sidetracked from that. Let's get back to it. We just go to the path and then apply a click. This allows us to select anchors, but I think this is actually the wrong tool for what I'm looking for. Hold on a second. So this seems to be an anchor selection tool. Let's see, I want to do a cutting type tool instead, I believe. Pencil tool. Where are we? I know for an instructional video, this is probably not the best type of thing to be doing on the fly. There is a slice tool, though, that we can use. So we just need to kind of hunt that down. We have eraser tool, which can be a little bit messy. It creates a sort of eraser blob. Let's watch what happens when we apply it, though, in this case. So I hover over this, and this only works for lines that you select. It does not erase other things that you don't select. For instance, if I put the eraser tool up here, it just ignores any of my efforts there. See, it'll look like it's erasing things, but it didn't actually change any of the background. It just leaves it alone because we don't have that selected specifically. This line, however, is selected. And if I just hover it here and just do one click, you'll notice that it didn't really want to erase it. Instead, it just erased the shape that it surrounded. Let's see what happens if we change this in from a solid object into one that has no fill, and then do the eraser tool again. Will this fix it? Not so much. So what is kind of neat is that when you create new curves here, though, it will create new anchor points. So we can actually see that here where there's a new anchor point here. There's another 1 or 2 or 3 anchor points that I put around there. But we want to actually like erase it rather than just deforming the line shape. So the eraser tool thing, we can change to scissors and then just maybe put a snip right there. So this put an anchor point in. Let's zoom way in to see what we did here. So I put in a new anchor point. I can put another anchor point right here with the scissors tool and another one here. And what's interesting is that now you can actually start deleting parts of the line. So let's say I want to snip out here and here. I could put anchor points here and here, and then select those anchor points. So let's select this, and then hold down Shift and select this other anchor point with the direct selection tool. And then if I hit delete, it will get rid of at least some of that. Hold on, I think it selected some of the wrong stuff. So let me try this again with this part. And then with this anchor point here, if I delete these, then it gets rid of those. If there are other anchor points that were left behind, you can just select the specific path and get rid of the whole path that way. So this is sort of a weird way that you can erase stuff with Illustrator. And it might seem kind of obtuse, but this is because, again, it doesn't erase pixels. There are no pixels to erase. It needs to be told, okay, where do you want to put separations in the line? It sees lines as continuous things. So you need to put in new anchor points so that you can decide, okay, on the left side of this anchor point and on the right side of this other anchor point, I want the line to be deleted. So that's the weird part about trying to erase stuff here. And you might be thinking, well, that seems super obnoxious, especially when we think about cropping something. So there's a lot of different things we'd have to do to make cropping work. Although it's not necessarily that effort intensive, as we're going to see in a bit. Just trying to reset things back to what they were. And right about, okay. We're just going to delete this. Not going to look at that anymore. All right. Let's say I want to just have an inset of the Nucleus of Comets. Based on how it doesn't just arbitrarily cut lines everywhere, it doesn't put in new points, you have to do what's called a clipping mask. This is one way that we could crop things down in Illustrator when there isn't like a clean erasing tool, or it doesn't just crop the image automatically. So one way that we do this, creating a clipping mask, involves adding a new rectangular object over something. Think of it like you cut out a square in a piece of paper, and then you're looking through that square. Some of what's supposed to be in your field of view is blocked by the outline of that square, and then you just see what's in the square. But you know that there's still stuff that's outside of your field of view because you still have object permanence. You still know that when you hide something, it still exists. So that is something similar that happens here. Let's give the clipping mask a try. First, we have to draw a new rectangle, which I'm going to do about here. I have the solid layer selected, so it will create the rectangle and it will put it inside the solid layer. And I'm going to make it so that it encompasses a little bit of the lateral ventricle, a little bit of the external capsule and claustrum, and down through the base of the accumbens shell. So this seems like a good snapshot. Let's say we were trying to put injections into the accumbens shell or the accumbens core, and we wanted to put dots where they were. We don't want to show the whole brain slice because we want to make a much smaller figure. So we create this rectangle, and this rectangle has no fill and has an outline. This is basically what we want. We don't want a fill that's kind of obscuring things. And we see now this rectangle has been added to our list of things. Note that the order of this list is actually the order that you will have things laid on top of each other. So if this rectangle were filled, it would basically obscure anything behind it. But it's see-through, so we're good. Now that we have this, let's see what happens when we go to Object, Clipping Mask, Make. Ah, yes, the other part I forgot. So you don't just want to have a rectangle selected, you have to select anything else that you want to have included. We're going to turn off the grid view in the background to make sure we don't select that. We're going to include the rest of this, and we have to do a regular selection tool. So we're going to select the rectangle and everything that's inside of it. When I click on this, though, remember this is a solid shape, and when you click on any part of a shape, it'll select everything. So this might get a bit tricky. What I'm going to do instead is I'm going to click outside of here to make sure nothing's selected, and then create a drag, click and drag selection that encompasses the rectangle and stuff inside it. It's okay if you select a few things outside of it, because we only care about what's going to end up in the clipping mask. All right, so now it's selected things from multiple layers here. And let's see how it behaves when I tell it to make the clipping mask. I think this is because the clipping mask was still part of one of the layers. So let's go ahead and move this rectangle out of here into a new layer. So let's create a new layer real quick. We can do that by just hitting the little plus thing down here. It's called layer 6. We don't really care what it's called though, that's fine. And we're gonna put it all the way on the top. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna move this rectangle into layer 6. So now we still have this rectangle selected. We have all these other things in the other layer selected. And if I create a clipping mask, this should work out properly now. There we go. So we actually now have a separate thing here that is part of the clipping mask. So everything that was within the rectangle has now been moved up inside this layer in what's called a clipping group. And we see a ton of stuff here. These are all paths and things that have been ripped out of all the other layers and put into this clipping group, this sort of window I talked about before. So now if I just select the whole layer, we can move this chunk of things without it affecting the other parts of the Atlas page. Now, of course, this did a brutal number on erasing a lot of other things in the Atlas page. And that is unfortunate, but you know what? We don't really care about that. Let's go ahead and hide this and this so that all we have here is this guy. And if I move this, we'll just put it right here in the center. Now, there's an interesting thing that happens. It didn't cut the lines exactly at the border here. It cut them at its last closest anchor point. To illustrate that, let me just hover this selection tool, maybe the direct selection tool, over this path here. Hold on a second. Notice this is exiting outside the rectangle. We can see the rectangle here. This has exited from outside the rectangle and now is just kind of going up to here. So it hasn't forgotten some of the shapes if it didn't clip them out outside of the rectangle. Some things were irreversibly clipped. Like for instance, let's see where this one ends. We got this path here. This path was clipped off from other ones or was separated out. Some other paths, the same deal. But you'll also notice that we have the outline of the brain, the very littlest bit of it right here. It actually kept the whole rest of the shape outside of our clipping mask. So this is interesting because watch what happens when we undo a clipping mask. So let's go ahead, select the whole layer that has a clipping mask, maybe even just select the clip group. We go to Object, Clipping Mask, Release. And it brings a lot of it back. It doesn't bring back everything. I actually hit a bunch of stuff. So let's see what happens as far as bringing some of that back. I kind of move things around, so it's a little bit out of place. And this is not a see-through background, so we kind of have to edit that. Let's change the fill to see-through. There. So if I select the whole layer 6 and then click and drag it down, we could try to realign things and fix what I messed up royally with this Atlas page. And there we go. Okay, yeah, so this is how you can actually undo clipping masks and restore a lot of the connections and lines that had been separated out by it. The reason why we make clipping masks again is so that we can take these zoomed in parts of the Atlas and then draw on them in any way that we choose. This brings up the idea of how we do some other things in this program. So for that, I'm going to open up one of the figures I had from a recently published paper. So let's take a look here. There's a lot going on in this figure, a lot. And we can see from the layers tab, it gets a lot to look at. So let's maybe ignore a lot of the things up there. Let's look at some familiar views of the brain. We do know coronal pretty well, but there's a lot going on with this inset. So we're just going to focus on the sagittal view, the side view of the brain. What I did was I took a sagittal page from the Atlas. I made sure all the lines were black. I turned all the dotted lines into solids. I got rid of a lot of random pieces. And then I shrank the whole thing down so it would fit here. I then created a rectangle to outline the region of interest containing lateral preoptic area, LPO, and the lateral hypothalamus, LH, which were the two areas of focus for this research. And I kind of just put a colored outline where those things existed. So then this red rectangle, I then suggested that, hey, we're going to zoom in on this by creating these red lines that reach out from it and line up with this clipping mask that I made. So this is a clipping mask made from a sagittal atlas page. And we can tell that because when I hover over with the selection tool and touch this, we actually see some of the remainder of the the outline of the entire bottom of the brain. But it's not visible as soon as I move the cursor. And so this is a clipping mask basically in action. You might be wondering what all these like beige, yellow, and pinkish blobs are here. We're going to just kind of hide those because they're a lot to look at. Each of these dots in this case represents the site of action of our manipulation in the rat brain. So we use optogenetics in the study. And so this is where there was the vector used for optogenetics and where we had neurons being activated. And we sort of have a radius of activity where this is where they're highly activated, and the more see-through parts are where they're less activated, but it goes a little bit farther out. And each one of these corresponds to one rat and their respective site in that brain region. So there's a lot of subjects here that we see, and we basically figured out where all these things are in the brain. All of these dots had to be of a standard size for this study. And at one point I realized, oh, the dots are the wrong size. I have to resize them. Let me show you a quick trick in order to do that. So what we can do is we can select all the dots at once. I actually have them all in their own sub layer here. I believe it's this one. So that's a lot of dots, and it's kind of a mess. Imagine clicking each one of those individually and resizing it. That seems ultra obnoxious. So there's a setting where we can do that with the objects. Go to Object, Transform. Transform does movement, rotation, scaling, reflection, shearing, all that sort of stuff. But in the drop-down menu in particular, we got a new thing called Transform Each. So what if I realized, oh, you know what? All of these are actually too big. I need to fix that. They actually need to be 3/4 the size of what they are. So that's about 75%. I'm going to just do that, hit 75, go to the next one, 75, and it scales all of them down. But you might have noticed a problem here. It scales them all down and then has them all shrink closer together because it didn't just scale down the size, it also scaled down the distance between all the dots. So that seems like a big no-no. Let's actually try to fix that a different way. So if we try to instead scale strokes and effects, hold on, there we go. We want to keep these in the same location that they are. And I think this program gets a little bit twitchy with how it does it. So let me try something really quick. Let's cancel that. We're going to deselect one of these things. So I'm going to deselect this by holding Shift and doing the direct selection tool. So Shift, we get rid of that one. Shift, we get rid of this one. And I believe it should actually work still. Let's try Transform Each. And I hit 75. It's 75. There. It did not change the distance between the center points of all these dots. In other words, it didn't pull them all closer together in the center here. It kept them exactly where they were, but still changed the size. Now, I think this is an error that's existed in Illustrator for a few versions. I know this existed in the 2019 version. You have to deselect like one of the objects out of the whole layer so it doesn't just squish everything together. And then we can just go back and select one of these later and just fix it with the scaling tool manually. But at least for like the vast majority of objects that are the same thing that you want to scale down in a layer without having them move from their original positions, this is how you do it. All right, but we'll cancel because they're the right size. There we go. So now we know how to scale things down en masse. That way we don't have to do it individually when there's a whole bunch of stuff to work with all at once here. Okay. let's say we want to mess around with shapes. I'm going to pick the medial amygdala here, and I am going to select it and maybe even try to drag it out to somewhere else. Let me go ahead and hide some things in the horizontal section. We're going to get rid of the blobs, going to get rid of all the dots. And now if I actually click and drag the medial amygdala around, ooh, it's still attached. Hold on. Let me select the medial amygdala specifically, and then click, and then drag. No, still attached to everything else. I think it's because all these are grouped together. So let's go ahead and actually undo that. We'll ungroup things. So let's take a look here. These are part of a clipping group. Let me widen this a bit so we can see the names here. And we can probably extract that path out of here by finding it right about there. That's the one. So then what we can do is we can actually move this path to a different layer potentially. Let's see if it lets us do this. This might be a little bit weird to do. Let's see what happens when I put it in the labels tab. So now I should actually be able to move it without it moving everything else around it. There we go. Look at that. So this is what happens when some objects are grouped together. Clipping masks tend to group everything inside them together into one group. If you want to ungroup things, there are various ways to do that. You can release a clipping mask. You can also go to this object drop-down menu, and if it's already grouped, you can select to ungroup it. If you want to have two things together that you want always to be together, like let's say I want the word posterior and medial amygdala to be together, I could just say, you know what, I want these grouped, and then it'll shove them kind of in like the same grouping, if you will. So now when I click on posterior, it'll actually also select this one. This is both the pro and con to grouping objects, because when you group objects, you can actually have a bunch of them select at the same time. So then you could just move them all together without having to select each and every one piece. But it's also annoying when you only want to select one thing. If you accidentally use the regular selection tool, it'll select everything within that group that's grouped together. So let's ungroup them because we don't need that right now. So now this should be its own separate thing. Good. And let's say I want to change this line from being dotted to something else. Well, we can go to properties and we can go to stroke and click on that. And we could actually change the thickness of that line. It does say points here, but these kind of scale to print rather than being some absolute measurement here in the actual file. So we can make it thinner, we can make it thicker. We can change the nature of the dash here. So we could make the gaps wider and the dashes also wider, or I should say longer in the cases of both. So let's make both 5 and 5. And then when I unselect it, we'll see that that actually changes how far apart the dashes are compared to the other structures that were here. So we could change dashes. We could actually change it from dash to being a solid line instead. So when we hit stroke, just uncheck dash line. Now it's solid. And then we could change the color. We could change the fill, you know, all the usual stuff that we've done before. One thing I didn't mention before was that you see how these are slightly see-through. If we select just one of these outer rings to get the see-through nature, we see that this is opacity 50. So it's a little bit see-through, still retains some of its color. And I believe the color is actually identical to the center as well. So when I click on the center, we see that the color has not changed in our color selector here from here to here. The thing that makes it lighter colored is the fact that it became more see-through. So this is opacity 100. This is opacity 50%. Alrighty. So that's kind of an overview of a lot of the tools you will be using. Let me see if there's anything else worth bringing up at the moment. There are various other things you can do with this program. It's a very, very complicated program, but hopefully this was a good preface to jumping into it. There are various selection and layer tools. Font tools can change things around a lot. They're kind of what you would see in other programs, though. Artboards. Yes, here we go. Artboards. So there is an artboard clicker tool here. Let's zoom way out, Control minus minus. This is one whole artboard. If you open a PDF file in Illustrator, and there are multiple pages to that PDF, even if it's a document, it will have these pages usually as separate artboards. And much like the actual thing of comic book nature, this is so you can have separate drawings and things like that be part of the same file without being printed out together necessarily. So this is why if you decide to save things like as a PDF, that can allow you to select certain artboards if there's more than one. So let's give it a try. Let's draw a new artboard over here. And let's say I want to move all this stuff here up to the new artboard. I don't want it to be here. I want it to be there. So we shove it over here. And then I maybe change the size of the artboard. Just select the background briefly. And then drag this down here. Now we have two artboards. I'll deselect that stuff. Looks clean. I hit File, Save As. And now we have multiple artboards to use. We can say, oh, you know, I want to just use the first one. And so if it tries to export a picture, it will only create a picture out of one of them. If you try to make it into something else, like not a PDF, but you export as an image, then you'll get a lot more options. And this is something else that is worth mentioning here. So if you want to turn it into something that Adobe Illustrator isn't continually modifying, like an AI file or a PDF file, you can turn them into regular old images. The thing about regular old images is that in most cases, they will do what's called flattening the image. The same thing happens with Photoshop, where despite having all these layers and all these separate objects, once you export it as a regular type of image file like JPEG or GIF or TIFF file that's non-layered, then it just basically all gets flattened together. So those layers become inseparable then. They just become one flat image with only one layer all stuck together. So it's useful if you want to create a figure that may be used for publication to convert it into something like a TIFF file. But if you want to be able to modify it later, you want to have either an AI or a PDF file accordingly. Let's see what options exist when we decide to make it into a PNG file. We can say use artboards. Now, this is important not just because we can select which artboards, but let's say I messed up the artboards. Let's say I wanted to just completely undo what I did and I only had one artboard. And when I say I messed up the artboard, let's say I made it too short and we cropped off some of the picture. Let's try two different things now. Export. Export as. If I just say export it as it is, and we make one PNG file, let's say. This will be number 1. Oh, hold on. Not what I wanted to do. Okay. Export. Select PNG. Blobs 1. Export. You'll then see it gives us a bunch of options. Screen resolution. If we want it to be a high resolution image, we should go for like 300 DPI, or sorry, PPI. Anti-aliasing, that is this function that basically tries to reduce the stepladder look of lines that are at a diagonal. You might know that when you zoom in on a line on an image file that's going at a diagonal, you zoom in enough, the pixels start to pop out and it kind of looks like a set of stairs. Anti-aliasing tries to fill in the gaps in those stairs to make it a smoother line rather than having it being a lot more jagged. This is something that pops up in a lot in video games as well. Background color, we don't want transparent. That's not going to be helpful. So we're going to make the background color white. And let's see what happens when we do this. Let's pull up the file. We go to my folder that has all this stuff. We take a look at the image file that we have. Yes, keep using this app. Yes, yes, yes. Okay. And so far, it seems to have taken everything that existed in this image. So we have everything that was on the artboard and all the stuff that spilled off the side of the artboard. Let's take another look back over here. So compare the two really quickly. In theory, if it was restricting it to just the artboard, this should not have appeared here. So this could be another way that we actually use this to our advantage and crop parts of the image. So let's give that a shot. We'll just close this out. Also, there's a bunch of extra white space over here because there's something else existing off the side of the artboard. So if you misplace something or if you move stuff around and it's way off an artboard and you can't find it, this will happen where there's like a ton of white space out there somewhere because it tried to print everything that you've made in the image that's supposed to be visible, which can be really annoying when you try to send somebody a picture and they're like, why is it all like squished up into one edge? And it's because there's extra stuff that's somewhere out there. But we're going to say, no, I want to restrict it to just the artboard. So we do this, export as, use artboards. We can use all our range. It's just one artboard, so it doesn't really matter. We hit export, and we'll do blobs 2 this time. We'll trigger the same settings, all good, and then hit OK, so that when we look at this second version, it is cropped the way that we had intended. So again, if clipping mask is not the way that you want to crop things, if you just want to crop it for image making purposes, this is a quick and easy way to do that, where you just change the sizing of the artboard without affecting any of the stuff on it. And you just say, when you're exporting it to an image file, hey, make it into this. Another thing about exporting, there are a lot of different options you could use. I prefer TIFFs because they give a lot more flexibility as far as what's information is contained in the image. So let me show you what happens when we do TIFF file. It gives us a few options. So we know the dots per image thing, points per inch PPI. It also allows us to change the color mode. There isn't going to be a very dramatic change if I switch from the CMYK to RGB because the colors are going to be similar. They're not going to change really even noticeably from what I've seen. But it may be necessary if somebody's looking for only RGB images, maybe because they're printing for a publication and they only work with that format. Or if you just wanted the image to be grayscale only, you can convert to grayscale without having to change anything inside the image, the original image. It just puts out an image that is now grayscale. So those are both really cool options. The resolution is just important for both the size of the file of the image as well as how big the print size is. When it says points per inch, and we do something like 300, that means that the resolution is going to be high and that for every inch is going to be super detailed, but it also might shrink down the image a little bit. We got the anti-aliasing thing as mentioned before. Lzw compression. This is important because sometimes image files get pretty honking huge, and we want to try to subdue how big they get. And the way that we do that is by clicking on Lzw compression. Let me show you a quick difference between these though. So let me just do it without. And so it'll create a new TIFF file. Then we'll export with Lzw compression. Same sorts of things where I tell it, use the artboard, crop it as I like. Actually did crop the other one. Don't believe it did. So let's just not select that. Oh, change the name so we can compare the two. Lzw compression. All right, so let's take a look at these. We have a few TIFF files. Let's scroll this over. So we've got TIFF1, TIFF2. Look at that sizing difference. One of them is 56 megabytes, which for email attachment purposes, that's pretty huge. The other one, only 2 megabytes. So let's take a look at the difference between these. Yes, please. Please use that. Yes. Okay, so this is the one that's, again, not cropped TIFF. This is the one that is not compressed. And then this is the compressed one. Not really much of a visible difference, certainly. There might be a difference when you zoom in on it, but generally it's the same thing. So using that Lzw compression is really important when you're trying to send images to somebody fast that you don't want to shove onto Google Drive, especially if you don't pay for extra space on Google Drive, like I certainly don't. All right. One other thing I noticed that you might have also noticed here is that I have this grid that's going throughout the whole image space here. I use this to help me line things up cleanly, because without the grid, it's a little hard to figure out exactly where everything aligns to. So you can have a few different options in that regard. When you do view, you can have smart guides that help you snap things to different spots. You can hide the grid to get rid of it, but it still kind of exists, because one of the other things you can do is you can say, oh, snap to grid. So it will actually start snapping to each of those little things in the grid, even if it's not visible. But I like to keep it visible so I at least know how things are lining up. So I do prefer that. You can have other things like snapping shapes to points, snapping shapes to glyphs, as in like letters and symbols and numbers. You can turn these off in case you don't want whatever you're moving to automatically jerk your cursor over to that spot, as it will do it when you say snap to whatever. Some guides might actually also appear on the edges, depending on what your circumstances are. You can have rulers put in here. This gives us, let's see, I believe these are pixels. We might be able to edit these accordingly. Let's see if it gives me the option. Yes. So these are points. We could do pixels. So this is the pixel estimate. Remember, the image isn't really made in pixels, though, per se. It's just giving you an estimate of, if you were to export it into an image right now, this is how many pixels it would occupy. And then it would export it into pixels, and the lines would become not nearly as smooth when you zoom in. They would become that staircase type formation. All right. I think that's about all I wanted to cover in this demonstration. It's already a little bit over long. So hopefully you've gotten a good preface about how you would tackle this program and how you would use it for creating figures and other such things. Now, seeing as you can put all these things in here, this is also a great way to make posters, because then you can determine what the size of the poster is based on, again, these rulers that I toggled on in the view drop-down menu. And then you just have an artboard be a certain size. You put in bubbles that represent, oh, this is where the title goes. These are who the authors and researchers are. You put in an emblem for your respective school, other things of that nature. So I usually make my posters here, especially because I can continue editing all the little bits and pieces in a way that will be very hard to do in other programs like PowerPoint. But that said, PowerPoint is a good starter for working with poster stuff. If you want to do stuff that's a lot more complex, where people have already made drawings in Illustrator, you can do that. Another fun fact, you can export graphs out of Excel into Illustrator and then convert them into paths and lines and such. So you can kind of reformat them rather than having to do them in a really haphazard way in a paint program. So some things in other programs can be converted into an Illustrator format where you can play around with all the lines, the colors, the thickness of each and every line as you see fit. But yeah, that about does it. So we're going to just close out these things. Notice that we can do multiple tabs. So you might want to do that, but if your computer doesn't have good hardware, it might slow things down. So do keep that in mind. The program is pretty resource demanding, especially the more stuff that you open. So do watch out for that. But that should wrap things up. So catch you next time.